The rain hammered against the kitchen window as Sarah Mitchell stood at the sink, her hands trembling slightly as she rinsed Emma's dinner plate. Outside, the Boston suburb was quiet, the kind of peaceful that still felt foreign after 2 years of running, 2 years of looking over her shoulder, 2 years of teaching her 7-year-old daughter to never ever mention their old address, their old life, or the man who used to be called Daddy. Emma sat at the small wooden table, her math homework spread before her, chewing on the end of her pencil. "Mom, what's 7 times 8? 56, sweetheart," Sarah replied, forcing her voice to stay steady, even as her pulse quickened at the sound of a car door slamming somewhere down the street. Just a neighbor. Always just a neighbor. But it hadn't always been paranoia. 3 weeks ago, she'd seen a silver sedan, the same make and model Marcus drove, parked 2 blocks from Emma's school. The driver had been a woman with grey hair, nothing like her ex-husband, but Sarah's hands had shaken so badly she'd barely been able to grip the steering wheel as she drove away. "Hey, you're doing that thing again," Emma said, her brown eyes so much like Sarah's own, watching her mother with the careful attention of a child who'd learned too young to read adult moods. "What thing?" Sarah asked, drying her hands on a faded dish towel. "The worried thing, where you look at the window like something bad's coming." Sarah's heart cracked a little. She crossed to the table and knelt beside Emma's chair, brushing a strand of dark hair from her daughter's face. "I'm not worried, baby, I'm just tired. Work was long today." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her shift at the small accounting firm had been exhausting, made worse by the constant hypervigilance that never quite left her, even in the most mundane moments. Marcus had found her once before, 6 months after she'd fled. Shown up at her apartment in Providence with flowers and apologies and that smile that used to make her feel special, but now only made her sick. It had taken a restraining order and another hasty move in the middle of the night to escape him that time. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Sarah's entire body went rigid. It was 8:47 p.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. The few friends she'd made in this neighborhood knew better than to drop by unannounced. She'd made it clear from the beginning that she valued her privacy, a polite way of saying she was hiding from something she couldn't name. "Stay here," Sarah whispered to Emma, her voice sharp enough that her daughter's eyes went wide. Another knock, firmer this time. Sarah moved through the small living room, her phone already in her hand, 911 ready to dial. Through the peephole, she saw a man standing on her porch, water dripping from his dark hair, a leather jacket soaked from the rain. Not Marcus. This man was taller, broader in the shoulders, his face unfamiliar, but somehow not threatening. He held a small package wrapped in plastic. Sarah cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" "Sorry to bother you this late," the man said, his voice deep but gentle. "I'm your neighbor from 47B. Just moved in last week. Your package got delivered to my place by mistake." He held up the box and Sarah could see her name printed on the label. Relief and embarrassment flooded through her in equal measure. "Oh, thank you. You didn't have to come out in this weather. Figured you might need it," he said with a slight smile. "I'm James, by the way, James Carter." Sarah unlocked the chain and opened the door wider, taking the package. "Sarah, I appreciate this." James nodded, already turning to leave, then paused. "Listen, I don't mean to overstep, but I noticed your porch light's been out for a few days. It's pretty dark out here at night. I've got spare bulbs if you need one." The observation was casual, helpful even, but it made Sarah's defenses snap back into place. He'd been watching her house enough to notice the light was out. James must have seen something in her expression because he raised his hands slightly. "Sorry, I'm in security systems, occupational hazard. I notice these things. Didn't mean to sound creepy." Security systems. Sarah filed that information away, unsure if it made her more or less comfortable. "I've been meaning to replace it. Just haven't gotten around to it." "No pressure," James said easily. "Offer stands if you change your mind. Have a good night, Sarah." She watched him walk back to his car, a dark blue sedan, not silver, her mind noted automatically, before closing and locking the door. 3 locks, just like always. "Who was that?" Emma asked from the hallway, where she'd been peeking around the corner despite being told to stay put. "Our neighbor. He just returned a package." Sarah set the box on the counter and pulled Emma close. "Time for bed, little one." As she tucked Emma in 30 minutes later, reading from their current chapter book, Sarah's mind kept drifting back to the man at the door, James Carter. There had been something in his eyes when he'd looked at her, not the predatory assessment she'd learned to recognize in Marcus, but something that looked almost like concern. She shook her head, closing the book. She couldn't afford to trust easily. Not anymore. Trust was what had kept her in Marcus's grip for 5 years, believing his promises that he'd change, that his jealousy was just because he loved her so much, that she was being too sensitive about the way he'd grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, or checked her phone, or slowly isolated her from everyone who cared about her. The rain had stopped by the time Sarah climbed into her own bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay in the darkness, listening to every creak and groan of the old house, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios the way it did every night. What she didn't know was that 3 states away, Marcus Mitchell sat in a dingy motel room with a map spread before him, a red circle drawn around a small suburb of Boston. It had taken him 8 months of searching, of hiring a private investigator who'd finally traced Sarah's new identity through a careless slip, a medical form for Emma that listed her old pediatrician as a reference. And what Sarah couldn't know yet was that the man in 47B, the one with the kind eyes and the security system expertise, would be the only thing standing between her and the nightmare she'd spent 2 years running from. But for now, in the quiet darkness, Sarah simply pulled the covers tighter and prayed for sleep that wouldn't come. 3 weeks passed in the careful routine Sarah had built for herself and Emma. Drop off at school by 8:15, work until 5, pick up by 5:30, dinner, homework, bedtime by 8:30. Weekends were for groceries, laundry, and the occasional trip to the park when Sarah felt brave enough to let Emma play in public spaces. She'd seen James Carter a handful of times, once in the parking lot, twice taking out his trash, and once when he'd been leaving his apartment just as she was arriving home. Each time he'd offered a friendly nod or a brief "good evening," never pushing for conversation, never lingering too long. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made Sarah nervous in a different way, one she didn't want to examine too closely. On a Saturday morning in late October, Sarah was carrying groceries from her car when one of the bags split, sending apples and cans rolling across the parking lot. She swore under her breath, setting down the other bags to chase after the scattered items. "Need a hand?" She looked up to find James jogging over, already scooping up 2 of the runaway apples. He was dressed casually in jeans and a grey Henley, his dark hair slightly messy like he'd just woken up. "I've got it," Sarah said automatically, even as a can of tomatoes rolled past her toward the storm drain. James caught it smoothly, then helped gather the rest of the escaped groceries into the remaining intact bags. "Here, I'll grab these. You get the door." Sarah wanted to refuse, to maintain the careful distance she kept from everyone, but Emma was inside waiting, and her arms were already aching from the first load. "Thank you," she said reluctantly. They made it to her apartment in silence. Sarah unlocked the door to find Emma sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by crayons and construction paper. "Mom, I'm making a—" Emma looked up and froze at the sight of James behind Sarah. Her daughter's face did something complicated, fear and curiosity warring for dominance. "It's okay, baby," Sarah said quickly. "This is our neighbor, Mr. Carter. He's just helping with groceries." James set the bags on the kitchen counter, then stepped back, giving Emma space. "Hi there. You must be Emma. Your mom mentioned you go to Brookside Elementary. That's a great school. My niece went there." Emma nodded slowly, her small hands clutching a red crayon. "Do you have kids?" "Nope, just me," James said easily. "But I've got 3 nieces and 2 nephews, so I'm pretty much an expert in kid stuff. Like right now, I can tell you're making either a really colorful dinosaur or a sunset. Am I close?" Despite herself, Emma giggled. "It's a dragon, with a castle." "Ah, I see it now," James said, leaning slightly to get a better look without moving closer. "The purple really sells it. Everyone knows the best dragons are purple." "Exactly." Emma's face lit up in a way that made Sarah's chest ache. Her daughter deserved to have more moments like this, more lightness, more adults she could trust. But trust was earned, not given freely. Sarah had learned that lesson too late the first time. "Mr. Carter, thank you for your help," Sarah said, her tone polite but final. James caught the dismissal and straightened. "Of course. Have a good weekend, both of you." He paused at the door. "Oh, and Sarah, that porch light is still out. Really not safe with winter coming and it getting dark so early. I can change it for you if you want. Take me 2 minutes." Sarah bristled at the implication that she couldn't take care of herself, even as a small voice in her head whispered that he was right, that she'd been putting it off because climbing ladders in the dark made her feel too exposed. "I'll handle it, but thanks." Something flickered across James's face, disappointment maybe, or understanding, before he nodded and left. Emma was quiet for a moment after the door closed. Then, "He seems nice." "Maybe," Sarah allowed, starting to unpack the groceries, "but we don't know him yet." "We don't know anyone," Emma said, and the sadness in her voice cut straight through Sarah's careful defenses. Before Sarah could respond, Emma continued, "At school everyone talks about their dads, about camping trips and soccer practice and teaching them to ride bikes. I told Madison my dad lives far away and we don't see him anymore. Was that okay?" Sarah knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. "That was perfect, sweetheart. You handled it exactly right." "I don't miss him," Emma whispered against Sarah's shoulder. "Is that bad? I know I'm supposed to miss my dad, but I don't." "No, baby. That's not bad," Sarah said, her throat tight. "That's not bad at all." Because Emma didn't remember the good parts, the early years when Marcus had been charming and attentive, before the jealousy had turned poisonous, before the control had become suffocating. Emma only remembered the loud arguments, the way her mother had flinched at sudden movements, the night Sarah had packed their bags while Marcus was at work and disappeared without a trace. That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah finally changed the porch light. She dragged a kitchen chair outside, climbed up shakily, and had just removed the old bulb when she lost her balance. She would have fallen if strong hands hadn't steadied her, catching her waist and helping her down. "Careful," James said, and Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear him over the rush of blood in her ears. She jerked away from his touch, nearly stumbling in her haste. "What are you doing?" James held up his hands, stepping back immediately. "I heard you dragging furniture. Thought you might need a spotter." "I'm sorry, I should have said something before touching you." The awareness in his words, the careful way he maintained distance now, made something in Sarah's chest unclench slightly. "I've got it handled." "I can see that," James said, but he didn't leave. "Mind if I spot you? Just in case." "Won't touch unless you fall again." Sarah wanted to say no, wanted to maintain her independence, but her hands were still shaking and the chair was wobbly and she really didn't want to break her arm falling off the damn thing. "Fine, but stay back there." It took 3 minutes to install the new bulb with James standing a careful 5 feet away, his hands in his pockets, offering nothing but his presence as backup. When Sarah climbed down successfully, she expected him to make some comment, some "I told you so" about how she needed his help. Instead, he just said, "Good job. Light looks bright." "Why are you being so nice?" The question came out sharper than Sarah intended. James tilted his head, considering her. "I'm not being nice, I'm being neighborly. There's a difference. Most neighbors don't pay this much attention." "Most neighbors don't have my training," James replied. "I spent 10 years in personal security before I started my own company. I'm wired to notice things. Exits, lighting, vulnerable points. Your porch light being out meant your entrance was a blind spot. That bothers me professionally, not personally." "So this is just your security instinct," Sarah said, not sure if she was relieved or disappointed. James's expression shifted, something warmer entering his eyes. "I didn't say that." Before Sarah could respond, before she could process what that meant, James continued, "Look, I can tell you've got your guard up for good reasons. I'm not asking you to trust me, but I am asking you to let me be a decent human being who fixes lights and carries groceries and makes sure his neighbors are safe. That's it. No strings, no expectations." Sarah studied his face in the glow of the new porch light, searching for deception, for the hidden agenda she'd learned to expect. But all she saw was sincerity. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you for spotting me." "Anytime," James said, and Sarah believed him. What she didn't know was that 400 miles away, Marcus Mitchell was packing a bag, his private investigator's latest report confirming Sarah's location down to her apartment number. What she didn't know was that in 2 days, her carefully constructed new life was going to shatter. But for now, standing on her well-lit porch with a man who'd given her space to be afraid, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Almost safe. The knock came at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, hard and insistent enough to make Sarah's blood freeze. She'd been washing dishes, Emma already in bed for half an hour, the apartment quiet except for the low murmur of the television. The second she heard that knock, not the polite tap of a neighbor but the demanding pound of someone who expected the door to open, Sarah knew. She didn't know how, didn't know when he'd found her, but every cell in her body recognized that knock. Marcus. Her hand shot out and grabbed the kitchen knife from the drying rack, her other hand fumbling for her phone. Through the peephole she could see him, 2 years older, hair shorter, but the same cold determination in his eyes that she remembered from the worst nights of their marriage. Sarah. His voice carried through the door, calm and controlled in that way that used to terrify her. I know you're in there. I can see your shadow. Open the door. Go away, Marcus, or I'm calling the police. Her voice shook despite her best efforts. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Don't you think I deserve that after you kidnapped my daughter? The audacity of it nearly stole her breath. You lost custody rights when you tried to break my arm. You have a restraining order. Leave now. That restraining order was filed in Rhode Island, sweetheart. We're in Massachusetts now, different jurisdiction. You really should have done your research. His tone was almost pleasant, the way he used to sound right before he'd trap her in a corner and list all the ways she'd disappointed him. Now, I've driven a very long way. We can do this the easy way. You open the door, we have a civilized conversation, or we can do it the hard way, your choice. Sarah's hands trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. She should call 911, she should scream. She should... The pounding started again, harder now, the door shaking in its frame. Mommy? Emma's terrified whisper came from the hallway. Stay in your room, Sarah commanded, her voice breaking. Lock the door and don't come out. Sarah! Marcus roared, and she heard something crack. The door frame, maybe, or the lock starting to give. You can't hide from me. I'm her father. I have rights. Sarah was dialing 911 when she heard a different voice, calm and deadly serious. Step away from the door. Through the peephole, Sarah saw James appear in the hallway, positioned between Marcus and her apartment. He was barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt like he'd come straight from his own apartment without stopping to prepare. Marcus turned, sizing up the younger, larger man with visible disdain. This doesn't concern you, friend. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, James corrected, his voice level. And I'm not your friend. I'm the guy who's going to break your arm if you touch that door again. Tough talk from someone who doesn't know the situation, Marcus sneered. That woman in there stole my daughter. Disappeared in the middle of the night with no warning. I'm just trying to see my kid. The woman in there has a restraining order against you for domestic violence, James replied, and Sarah's breath caught. How did he know that? You're violating it right now. The police are already on their way. I called them 3 minutes ago when I heard you threatening her. Marcus's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. Sarah likes to exaggerate. She's always been dramatic. Haven't you, sweetheart? He raised his voice for that last part, making sure Sarah heard through the door. Last warning, James said, and something in his tone made Sarah shiver. This wasn't the friendly neighbor who'd helped with groceries. This was someone else entirely. Someone with training, with experience, with the absolute confidence of a man who knew how to handle threats. Walk away now, or wait for the cops in handcuffs. Your choice. For a long moment, nobody moved. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Emma crying softly in her room, could hear Marcus's heavy breathing through the door. Then Marcus laughed, cold and bitter. This isn't over, Sarah, he called out. You can hide behind your boyfriend all you want, but I'm not going away. Emma's my daughter. You can't keep her from me forever. Actually, she can, James said. That's what restraining orders are for. And in about 90 seconds, you're going to have an arrest record in Massachusetts to go with the one in Rhode Island. So if I were you, I'd start running. As if on cue, Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Marcus must have heard them too because he swore viciously and bolted for the stairwell. James didn't chase him. Instead, he turned to Sarah's door. "Sarah, are you okay? Emma?" Sarah couldn't make her hands work to unlock the door. She stood frozen, the knife still gripped in her white-knuckled hand, her entire body shaking with adrenaline and terror and the sick relief of a nightmare temporarily avoided. "Sarah." James's voice was softer now. "The police will be here in about 30 seconds. I need you to put down whatever weapon you picked up and open the door slowly when they arrive, okay? I'll explain the situation, but they need to see you're not a threat." "Right. Police." She was still holding a knife. Sarah set it down with trembling hands, just as she heard boots pounding up the stairs, radios crackling. The next 20 minutes blurred together. Police officers, questions, a brief chase that ended with Marcus being apprehended in the parking lot, more questions. James stood nearby the whole time, answering when needed, silent when not. A steady presence that kept Sarah anchored when everything felt like it was spinning out of control. Finally, one of the officers, a woman with kind eyes and grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, knelt in front of where Sarah sat on her couch. "Ms. Mitchell, we've arrested your ex-husband for violating a restraining order, attempted breaking and entering, and making terroristic threats. He'll be held overnight at minimum. But I need to ask, is this the first time he's found you since you relocated?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "How did he find you?" "I don't know," Sarah whispered. "I've been so careful. New name on the lease, new job, new everything. I don't know how—" "We'll investigate," the officer assured her. "In the meantime, I strongly recommend you file for an emergency restraining order here in Massachusetts. The Rhode Island one technically applies, but having local documentation will make things smoother. I can have victim services reach out tomorrow to help you with the paperwork." After the police left, after Sarah had checked on Emma 17 times and confirmed all the locks were secure and wedged a chair under the doorknob for good measure, she finally let herself collapse. The knock that came 30 minutes later was soft, tentative. Sarah checked the peephole with her heart in her throat, then sagged with relief when she saw James. She opened the door to find him holding 2 steaming mugs. "Tea," he said simply. "Chamomile. Figured you probably couldn't sleep." Sarah took the offered mug with shaking hands, stepping back to let him in. They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound Emma's soft snoring from her bedroom. "How did you know?" Sarah finally asked. "About the restraining order." "About Marcus." James wrapped his hands around his own mug. "I didn't, not for certain. But I recognized the signs, the hypervigilance, the way you flinch at loud sounds, how you always position yourself where you can see all the exits. I've worked with enough domestic violence survivors to recognize the pattern." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier. Offered resources, but I didn't want to overstep." "You called the police before you even came out of your apartment," Sarah said, the realization just hitting her. "I heard him pounding on your door, heard the threat in his voice. That was enough. You could have been hurt. Marcus is—" Sarah's voice broke. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Actually, I do," James said quietly. "My sister was married to a man like Marcus. For 8 years she stayed, kept making excuses, kept believing he'd change. When she finally left, he stalked her for 6 months before showing up at her work with a gun." Sarah's breath caught. "Is she—" "She's alive." "Barely." Security guard intervened, took a bullet meant for her. Guy survived, thank God, and my sister finally pressed charges. But those 6 months of her looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, not being able to trust anyone. James's jaw tightened. "I watched that destroy her. And I swore if I ever saw the signs again, if I ever had the chance to actually help instead of just standing by feeling useless, I would." "So that's what this is?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. "Some kind of redemption for not protecting your sister?" "No." James set down his mug and turned to face her fully. "This is me, getting to know a strong, careful woman who's doing everything right to protect herself and her daughter. This is me, respecting the hell out of someone who had the courage to leave when so many don't. And yes, maybe it's also me, seeing a chance to make sure the ending is different this time. Is that so wrong?" Sarah couldn't answer. couldn't speak around the emotion clogging her throat. "You don't owe me anything, Sarah," James continued. "Not gratitude, not trust, nothing. But I need you to know, I'm not going anywhere. Marcus showed up here once. He might try again. And until you feel safe, until the legal system does its job and he's genuinely out of your life, I'm going to be here, in 47B, one door away, a phone call away, whatever you need." "Why?" The question came out broken. "You barely know me." "I know enough," James said simply. "I know you deserve to sleep without fear. I know Emma deserves to draw her dragons without wondering if her father's going to show up. I know you've spent 2 years running and you shouldn't have to run anymore." Sarah felt tears spilling down her cheeks, hot and unstoppable. When was the last time someone had offered help without wanting something in return? When was the last time she'd let herself lean on anyone? "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just of Marcus, but of this. Of letting someone close. Of trusting again and being wrong. And—" "Then don't trust me," James interrupted gently. "Not yet. Let me prove I'm trustworthy first. Let me be your neighbor, your backup, your extra lock on the door. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready for more than that, I'll still be here." They sat in silence, Sarah crying quietly, while James simply existed beside her, solid and steady and asking for nothing. Finally, exhausted beyond measure, Sarah spoke. "He said it wasn't over. He's right. Getting arrested tonight won't stop him. He'll make bail and he'll come back, and next time we'll be ready," James said firmly. "Tomorrow I'm installing a better security system on your door. Cameras, reinforced locks, the works. I'm also going to teach you some basic self-defense, if you're willing. And I'm going to make sure every authority who needs to know about Marcus is informed and prepared." "I can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to pay for it," James cut her off. "Consider it a professional courtesy. I own a security company, remember? This is what I do." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence, but she was too tired, too scared, too overwhelmed. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." James stood, carrying their empty mugs to the sink. At the door he paused. "Try to get some sleep. I'll be right next door if you need anything. And Sarah, you did everything right tonight. You protected Emma. You called for help. You survived. Don't forget that." After he left, Sarah checked the locks one more time, checked on Emma, then finally allowed herself to sit on her bed and process what had happened. Marcus had found her. Her worst nightmare had come true. But for the first time in 2 years, she hadn't faced it alone. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost like hope. The next morning arrived with grey skies, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from a sleepless night, spent reliving every sound, every creak, every shadow. Sarah had drifted off sometime around 4 a.m., only to jolt awake at 6:30 when her alarm went off, her heart racing before she remembered where she was. Safe. Marcus was in jail. James was next door. Emma appeared in her doorway, pale and quiet in a way that made Sarah's chest ache. Is he gone? The bad man? Sarah pulled her daughter into bed beside her, wrapping her arms tight. He's gone, baby. The police took him away. Will he come back? The question hung in the air, heavy with the truth they both knew. Sarah had always tried to be honest with Emma, age-appropriate but honest. Lying now would only make things worse later. He might try, Sarah said carefully. But we're going to make sure we're ready if he does, mister. Carter is going to help us make the apartment safer, and the police know all about him now. We're not alone this time. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her small fingers tracing patterns on Sarah's arm. I was really scared last night. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. A soft knock interrupted them. Through the peephole, Sarah saw James holding a cardboard drink carrier and a paper bag. I brought breakfast, he said when she opened the door. Figured cooking might not be on the agenda this morning. Coffee, hot chocolate, and bagels. Emma peeked around Sarah's leg, her eyes widening at the sight of the hot chocolate. Is that for me? If your mom says it's okay, James replied, crouching to her level. I wasn't sure if you liked chocolate or vanilla, so I got both. Chocolate, Emma said immediately, some of the shadows lifting from her small face. They ate breakfast at Sarah's kitchen table, an oddly domestic scene that felt both comforting and surreal. James had brought his laptop and walked Sarah through the security upgrades he wanted to install: cameras on the door and windows, reinforced strike plates, a smart lock she could control from her phone. "This is too much," Sarah protested, looking at the equipment list. "I can't let you—" "You're not letting me do anything," James interrupted gently. "I'm choosing to do it." "There's a difference." The doorbell rang, making all three of them tense. James was on his feet immediately, checking his phone. "Relax. It's the Victim Services Advocate. Officer Chen said she'd send someone by this morning." The advocate turned out to be a woman in her 50s named Patricia, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She sat with Sarah for 2 hours, walking through the process of filing an emergency restraining order in Massachusetts, documenting last night's incident, and discussing long-term safety planning. "Your ex made bail this morning," Patricia said gently, and Sarah's stomach dropped. "But he's been ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from you, Emma, and this address. He's also surrendered his passport and has a GPS monitor. If he violates any of these conditions, he goes straight back to jail, no bail." "He won't care about conditions," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "Marcus doesn't think rules apply to him." "Then he'll learn differently," Patricia replied firmly. "But I won't lie to you, Sarah. The system isn't perfect. Even with all these protections, you need to be vigilant." While Patricia worked, James installed the first of the security cameras. Emma watched with fascination as he explained how each one worked, her fear from the night before slowly being replaced by curiosity. After Patricia left, Sarah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her entire body went rigid. "Don't answer it," James said immediately. But Sarah was already reading the text that had come through. "You can't hide forever. Emma belongs with her father. I'm not giving up." Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. James took it gently, read the message, and immediately screenshotted it. "I'm sending this to Officer Chen. This is a violation of the restraining order. He's not supposed to contact you at all." That evening, after the security system was fully installed and Emma was finally asleep, Sarah found James reviewing camera feeds outside her door on his laptop. "What are you doing?" she asked, stepping into the hallway. "Making sure the system is working properly," James replied. "All clear so far. You're not planning to sit out here all night, are you?" "I'm planning to sit here until I'm satisfied everything is functioning correctly. If that takes all night, then yes." Sarah sank down beside him, her back against the wall. "You can't protect us forever, James. You have a life, a business. I can do whatever I need to do to make sure you and Emma are safe," James replied, finally meeting her eyes. "And right now, that means being here." "Why?" the question burst out of her. "And don't give me the line about your sister. There's more to this." James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "My sister's ex-husband found her at work, shot her in the parking lot while 17 people watched and nobody did anything. I was one of those 17 people, Sarah. I saw him approach her, saw him raise the gun, and I froze. By the time I could move, she was already bleeding. A 60-year-old security guard did what I should have done." Sarah's breath caught. "James, I'm not freezing again," James continued fiercely. "I'm not standing by while someone I care about is in danger. I have the training now, the resources, and I'm not hesitating." "Someone you care about?" Sarah asked softly. James looked at her for a long moment. "Someone who's become important to me. Someone I'd like to know better if she's ever ready." "James, I'm not in a place—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I'm just being honest. You don't have to do anything with that information. I'm still going to help, regardless." They sat in silence until Sarah spoke. "When I met Marcus, I thought I'd found someone who saw me. I was 22, working 2 jobs. He made me feel special." She pulled her knees to her chest. "It didn't start bad. It was wanting to spend all his time with me, then suggesting I didn't need friends so often, then checking my phone. By the time I realized what was happening, I was so isolated I didn't know how to leave." "What changed?" "Emma. When I got pregnant, I thought it would fix things. Instead, it got worse. I could handle it when it was just me. But the night he raised his hand to Emma, I knew. I had to get out." James took her hand slowly. "Emma seems incredible. That's all you. I'm terrified I'm screwing her up. All this fear, teaching her not to trust. A childhood where she's safe and loved, James said firmly. That's what you're giving her. Everything else can be worked on later. Sarah squeezed his hand. Thank you for seeing me. Not the victim, just me. I see someone incredibly brave, James said softly. Sarah's phone buzzed. Officer Chen. Marcus violated GPS perimeter. Unit en route. Stay inside. Sarah's grip tightened. He's coming back. Police are on it, and I'm here. Minutes later, Officer Chen called. We've apprehended your ex trying to access your building. He's back in custody. This time the judge won't grant bail. The GPS violation plus the text constitutes a clear pattern. Relief flooded through Sarah. You really have him. We have him. Arraignment tomorrow. I suggest you attend with an attorney. The courtroom was smaller than expected. Marcus sat in an orange jumpsuit, looking diminished. When his eyes found Sarah, something ugly twisted across his face. Marcus's lawyer painted him as a sympathetic father, separated from his daughter. Then prosecutor Linda Reeves laid out the history, the restraining order, documented abuse, Sarah's testimony. Then the escalation, hiring a PI, traveling states, attempted break-in, GPS violation, threatening texts. This isn't a father seeking access, Linda said. This is obsessive behavior that's escalated to where Ms. Mitchell fears for her safety. The judge asked if Sarah wanted to make a statement. Sarah's legs shook as she stood. She'd written something but put it away, looking at Marcus directly. For 5 years, I told myself his jealousy was normal. His control was love. When Emma was born, I thought things would improve. Instead, they got worse. The night I left, he'd screamed at our 15-month-old, raised his hand to her. I knew if I stayed, he'd hurt one of us. She looked at Marcus. I spent 2 years hiding, teaching my daughter to be afraid. You found us anyway. Tried to break down my door with her inside, terrified. This isn't about fatherhood. This is about control. Sarah turned to the judge. I'm asking you to keep him away. Emma deserves to grow up without fear. The judge reviewed documentation, then looked up. Mr. Mitchell, I've reviewed your history extensively. I'm denying bail and ordering you held pending trial. Additionally, I'm issuing a permanent restraining order. No contact with Ms. Mitchell or Emma. Marcus's lawyer protested, but the judge cut him off. You're looking at minimum 2 years if convicted, and the restraining order remains after release. We're adjourned. The gavel fell with finality. It was over. Outside, Sarah stood on the courthouse steps, breathing clean air. What now? She asked. James smiled. Now you live your life. Take Emma to school without looking over your shoulder. Let yourself be happy if you remember how. I'm not sure I do. Then we'll figure it out together. 6 months later, Sarah watched Emma and James frost cupcakes for Emma's 8th birthday. Chocolate covered everything, but they were laughing. Can Mr. James stay for my party? Emma asked. I think we can manage that, Sarah replied, catching his eye. 6 months since Marcus's sentencing. 3 years. 3 years that gave Sarah time to breathe, rebuild, believe in a future. James had been there for all of it, not as a savior but as a partner. Installing locks, attending conferences, teaching self-defense. Between security upgrades and school pickups and late nights, just neighbors had become something more. Built carefully, with foundations Sarah had never known. I have something for you, James said after cleanup, pulling a small box from his pocket. James? Relax. Not that kind of box. Not yet. Inside was a key. To my apartment, James explained. I know Emma has nightmares sometimes. I want you both to know you always have a safe place. My door is always open. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. You're giving me a key. I'm giving you proof I'm staying, that I'm in this for the long haul. I still have so much I'm working through. I know I'm not asking you to be fixed. I'm asking to be part of your life, messy parts and all. Sarah looked at the key, this small piece of metal representing trust, partnership, possibility. I want that, she said softly. I want you. James pulled her close and Sarah marveled at how different this felt. No fear, no eggshells, just steady affection built on respect and patience. Mommy? Emma appeared. Can't sleep. Come here, baby. Emma looked between them. I think Mr. James should move in with us. James spoke first. That's up to your mom. These things take time, but I'd really like that too, someday. Someday soon? Emma pressed. Maybe, James allowed, meeting Sarah's eyes. If your mum wants. Later, Sarah stood at her window. Somewhere Marcus lived with consequences. Here, Sarah lived with rewards, courage to leave, strength to rebuild, wisdom to accept help. Her phone buzzed. James. The Tower Guard would be honored to officially protect the princess and queen. Whenever you're ready. No rush. Sarah smiled. She'd spent so long afraid, believing she didn't deserve happiness. Maybe it was time to believe differently. Soon, she typed. Not yet, but soon. And James? Thank you. His response. Nothing to thank me for. You did the hard part. I just showed up. But showing up was everything. Sometimes the greatest gift wasn't grand gestures, but simply being present, steady, there. She looked at the key beside Emma's photo. A promise and possibility, a future waiting. And for the first time in years, Sarah wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready.